Hey, welcome back everyone. Rob here from Ramp Studio Comics. So in today's video, I'll be drawing Bane for you and talking about that process. And for those of you that want to learn more about how to draw comics both traditionally and digitally, I've got classes on Skillshare. I'll make sure there's a link in the description box below. And without further ado, let's jump into today's video. Okay, so in today's video, I want to talk about struggling to draw certain things. So do you struggle to draw certain things? And more importantly, what do I do to combat that? But I want to be honest, I still struggle to draw certain things, and I've been drawing comic art for over 20 years. I'm 46 now, and I've actually been drawing ever since I really can remember. But as far as specifically trying to get better at drawing comic art, I can say safely about 25 years of my life, I have been pushing towards that goal. Now, obviously, there's times I was a lot more dedicated than others and spent a lot more averaged hours in the day of 8 to 10 hours, and other times where it was like maybe an hour here, sketch there, whatever. So there are those different intervals in my life that I can't quite calculate. But the main purpose is this: even though I've spent that absorbent amount of time on a very specific goal of drawing characters and comics in this way, there's certain things that I can draw well and other things I still struggle to draw. And I really just want to tell people that face that, that's okay. And to me, that's just part of the journey. But I know it's real easy to get caught up in that and say, well, I've dedicated so much time, I've worked so hard, and I'm not getting the results I want. And that bothers me, and that makes me disenchanted and want to pursue something else. I totally get it. Sometimes you just wonder, am I barking up the wrong tree? Am I pursuing a goal that's not going to manifest into success or something? But for me, what I tend to think about is that, there's certain things that I can do pretty well with art. And I focus on that when I'm feeling bad. And I guess I try not to feel bad in general about anything like that. But it can just sneak its way into our minds, right? But I look at the things I do really well. For me, in this particular illustration, Bane's arm, right? I like the way the anatomy came out. Is it perfect? Heck no. Could it be better? Of course. But I still like it. I still think it came out the way I was expecting, and in areas, some things came out a bit better. And in other areas of the illustration, and mind you, this is a simple static illustration, I get that, but I think it's evident in all areas of our work if we pay close enough attention. And so you'll see that I struggle with the glove. I even struggle with the thing on his back. And I'll get into that a little bit, why I think that is, but and how to, combat that basically. But the main thing I want to tell you is that, we all face those. Now, they could be things going on in your life while you're not as focused as you think you are, or as relaxed as maybe you should be. Because I do think that with art, a lot of times it is important to kind of find your Zen state. I mean, I don't really know the full definition of what I just said there, but all I'm saying is a relaxed mode where you feel a sense of ebb and flow to what you're doing. And so for me, it's very distinct. I can usually pinpoint that pretty quickly and go, wow, I'm basically just sitting here in frustration. Time to get up, walk away, go take a walk, re-energize myself, play a game, whatever helps me reset the batteries. So there is that. But then there's also a very distinct area where I just know going into something, I'm not getting it. Now, the biggest part of that is repetition, right? So if you're drawing things repetitively over and over again, even though you might be getting really bored of it, you are, in my mind, in some ways getting just better at it. You're memorizing the forms better. You're seeing it more in detail to where you can now turn it in your mind's eye and your imagination. And I can say that with anatomy, especially arm anatomy. I've drawn arms so many times, that's not the hard part anymore. Now, certain poses of the arm may be tricky, and getting the anatomy, I don't want to say correct, because I oftentimes feel like when I veer away from correct anatomy like I did here, and I went with stylistic, interpretive and exaggerated anatomy, that I tend to do better. I tend to have more fun with it. It tends to come out more expressive. So that's a mental note for me. Okay, so sometimes I have to just let go and let imagination be my guide, with some basis of reality, but to really just have fun with it and explore. Maybe that's where I thrive creatively. So that's why, art is a journey. It's learning about the process, the techniques that you put down, but it's also learning about yourself, and how you really function and what brings out the best in you, right? And there's a lot to that. It's not a simple thing. I can't just say, Like you hear those repetitive answers of, just draw 10 hours a day and you'll be fine. Work on your anatomy, kid, or whatever, you're hearing from critiques and things. And that's true, but that's only a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't really quantify into the specifics that you might need to figure out, because part of that puzzle is just you, and we're all different. So that's, it's something we all have to work through ourselves and figure out when we thrive, when we do the best, and what slows us down. When do we need reference? Do we need to ditch reference sometimes and just go from what we think we know? There's all different variables into that. But there are some things that can safeguard you. So for instance, like I mentioned, repetitious behavior of studies of things that you just don't know. If you draw, I'll say the fist, for instance, right? So if I've drawn plenty of fists from plenty of different angles, I don't think a fist is ever really that hard for me to draw. I'm not saying I draw it perfectly, but I've done it so much that that's one of the easier things. But then I get down to his gauntlet area, that, the wristband kind of thing, and I was pulling reference, looking at different illustrations of Bane, and I noticed that, he's drawn different ways there. Some people have these very designed, mechanical looking, I'll just say more designed, more elements to it, and I tried going for that. And then I started to struggle with it, and I started to go, well, I don't really like the way this is coming out. And I ditched it, right? Just erased it and redrew it. Now, here's another thing. There's a lot of times in the illustration where I just want to get it done, right? I'm getting impatient, I'm looking at the clock, and I'm saying, no, if I was to do this for a client or in professional work, I would have to just finish it up. There is that, but there's also that part where you have to look at it and say, look, I know I can do this better. And even though you've already drawn it and you go to redraw it, even if you go to redraw it the same way, it tends to, I can't say always, but it tends to come out better because you've already placed those shapes in your mind. You've already worked on them, rendered them a bit. Even a soft erase and redraw the exact same thing almost always comes out better, at least in my opinion. Hopefully that's evident in your work as well. So there is that. And then there's other times you just have to look at it and go, okay, this isn't working out the way I thought. Is it a make or break it kind of thing with the art? Do I have creative liberties to change this? In this case, it's just fan art, so I can do whatever I want. I'm just practicing for the sake of the channel. But sometimes you can't change certain things. That's when breaking things down with the techniques that you learn in basic art will get you through it. Sometimes we get so caught up in all the advanced rendering, cross-hatching, all the textures and all that. But you got to remember, if those base shapes underneath aren't working, then that rendering is probably going to suffer a little bit. Some people are really good with their rendering and they manage to make it look good regardless. It can have some really noticeable flaws in the basic structure of it. But other people need that basic structure, or at least to understand it. And again, it's really a lot of simple shapes. I've noticed, like again, back to this hand piece, that the shapes were feeling flat and uninteresting. I was looking at somebody that did it much better, and I can't remember the artist, but I was just looking at random Google images of Bane, and somebody had this cool shot, and they had made this piece look really, really nice. And then I had to come to grips with it that, hey, my version just looks bad, and I got to get it out of there. And I went with something that I was more comfortable drawing. Again, that's not always an issue. That's me kind of running away from the problem, but at the same time, I'm also thinking, well, this is fan art. I can take creative liberty with this part. I couldn't do that with, say, his mask or certain elements of the character. And there are those times you can't do that. But keep in mind, I will go back and try to revisit this area of the work that I struggled with in my sketchbooks. So that's another thing, is being very deliberate about the things that you know that you're struggling with. Not just, I'm going to erase it, I'm going to redraw something I know I can draw, and then I'm going to forget about it. No, I mean, of course you're going to keep struggling with that. It's taking time to actually go back and revisit that thing on your own time, in your sketch pads, studying from other artists that are better than you, pulling out your art books, watching YouTube videos, all that fun stuff, right? And you just attack it head on. I mean, I'm all for hard work ethic as it pertains to art. I always see people that seem to think that all of this is talent. And I would like to think that I have some God-given talent or something like that. But at the same time, I know how hard I've worked over the years, and I know how bad my art was, and I still see flaws in my work, and that's cool. That's fine. That's part of the growth process. But I got boxes of really, really bad art. I've showed some on the channel. So it's not like I just came out drawing really well. I had to work really hard, and I'm still working really hard. I study all the time. So there is that. So there's the idea that we draw the things that we feel comfortable with, and we draw them over and over again. I know I'm guilty of it. You can look at my work and go through my portfolios, and you'll see a lot of similar poses and things like that. A lot of times what that says to me is that I'm drawing things that I feel comfortable with because I'm almost being a bit lazy. I just want to get out some art that I think looks good. I might have an idea for what's been accepted from others before, and they tend to liken my style. So what do? I conform like the masses and chase a bunch of likes and validation in my work, and I just create what people like. Now, there's certain times that's just important as an artist, I think, because you don't want to create things people don't like, but at the same time, you get caught up in that and chasing, likes and approval, and then you stop growing, in my opinion. So you got to be aware of that at least. You got to remember what your goals are. So if there's those things you're drawing well, then maybe you pull back from that a little bit. You say, okay, I already know that. I got that in my tool set. I'm good to go. I need to take time to study those things I don't do so well. An exercise I've been doing lately is I'll open up a comic book. I've got a bunch of them, I've got obviously a ton of regular comics, and I got a bunch of digital ones. It's easy for me to grab my iPad, bring up my Kindle app, and, jump in there and pull up some books. Well, I'll zoom into certain panels and various artists at any given day, and I'll just absorb something about a particular area of the work. It might just be a face shot. It might be as simple as an angle to a nose or an eye. Usually it's more like a panel, but I'll open up my sketch pad and I will draw just that panel in my sketch pad. And I'll tell you, like, it is so informative. Like, it's such a great way to learn really, really fast. So it's like, to me, it's kind of like the idea of doing your 10-figure drawings every morning, which is super important. Your gesture drawings and or a little bit more that are refined with some of your anatomy, whatever. But super important to take that time to do that. And actually, I got to bring some on the channel. People have been requesting that I just show my process for doing that. But the same thing is just opening up various comic pages. And also, don't just go for the people you really like. I mean, of course, do that as well. Find some that are obscure to your mind. And the reason why I think that's important is because it's an entirely different way that they utilize the shapes, the form, the shadows, the textures, all those things, their composition. And so you're just really revitalizing, in my mind, your imagination to see things differently. Because it's ultimately what I look at when I think of the imagination anyways. It's not like we're trying to draw things exactly the way they look. In some cases, it's got to be enough or it won't read properly, obviously. But we're trying to envision things in a way that no one's ever seen, or at least in a way that's specific to our creativity and our visualization. And it's part of the fun, right? Like when you look at a different artist and you go, whoa, the way they did it, it looks like wild, but awesome. Like I would have never thought to do it that way. That's the part that wakes your brain up a little bit. It's like when you go to a new place, you visit a new area, right? They say that part of your brain expands and it can never go back. Like I don't know where I heard that, but it just seemed like such a cool thing. And realistically, I think I could imagine that happening, like, or remember that happening. I went to Italy for a month, and I don't think I was ever the same after that. It was such an amazing trip. But at any rate, I digress. I'm just saying that what you need to do is when you can't draw certain things well, take the time to study them, but also, take from the strength of your strengths, the things that you do draw really well, and feel good about that. Let that boost your ego. Just don't stay there too long. Art is a progression. You have to study. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to figure out what excites you and as well. And sometimes you just got to take a break and relax your mind. All those things go into it. Just remember, you can draw it. You can get better at it. Just keep at it. So thanks for watching, and more on the way soon.